For this, we have the learner speaker, C. B.R. Popat sir, who has joined from Ahmedabad, and he is a practicing chartered accountant since 1984. So, without wasting much more time, I would like to request C. Prashant Rekaria to give the formal introduction of our today's speaker, C. B.R. Popat sir. Yes, Prashant.
Thank you, Ketan bhai. Good afternoon, members. It is my honor and great pleasure to introduce our today's speaker before you. Mr. Bharat Popat is a chartered accountant. He is a practicing since 1984 in the name and style of B.R. Popat and Company. He is the senior most partner of this firm, having 5 partners and 2 full-time associates. He has specialized in taxation and is handling a number of search and survey cases right up to Income Tax Appellate Tribunal. He has also appeared a number of times before the Income Tax Settlement Commission. Mr. Popat has done his BCom and LLB along with CA. He was university first both at BCom and LLB examination. He is a very fond of academic activity and is always ready to take lecture on various subjects of professional interest. He also likes to travel and has visited 39 countries in the last few years by taking vacation of almost 3 months of every year. With this word, I request to sir, please enlighten your knowledge on today's topics. Please, sir.
Thank you, Prashant bhai. Thank you, Ketan bhai. Let me start first by sharing the screen. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. You can see the screen, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sir, I am really happy by seeing your website that you have started your practice in Bhavnagar and since 2008 you have shifted to the Ahmedabad. Basically, I am also from the Bhavnagar, sir.
Oh, really?
So,
that's good.
I am really happy that in the small district, because what we are seeing that there are no people are saying that not much more opportunity in Bhavnagar, right?
Yeah, I know. Thank you. So let me start with the subject. I'm supposed to discuss on art of drafting deeds and documents. There is a contradiction because I'm speaking something so as to teach you as to how to draft, because these two particular things are completely distinct from each other. In one form, you try to convince the people by oral arguments, whereas in the other form, you just put something on paper and try to convince your point of view. So let us start with the first slide. Type of deeds and documents a practicing chartered accountant may be required to draft. Just a minute, okay. I was just thinking as to which are the possible situations where we as practicing chartered accountants would be required to deal with deeds and documents. The first and foremost would be the written submissions to be filed before various authorities, especially in the case of in assessments or in appeals, etc., or while responding to summons and notices, or drafting the commercial contracts or deeds, memorandum of agreements, etc. Then another form of drafting would be in the form of drafting a will or testamentary declaration or codicil, etc., and the loan applications. Now, each of these categories will have different kinds of skill required from a chartered accountant. I would primarily be focusing on the first and a couple of next thereafter, primarily with the income tax proceedings, because they have already become faceless, as you all are aware. The assessment is faceless now, except in Central Circle. Every single assessment is faceless. Similarly, CIT appeal has also become faceless for the last a few months. And you must be knowing that Nirmala Sitharaman, while presenting the finance bill on 1st of February, she declared that even the income tax appellate tribunal will become faceless in due course of time. So we are living in an era of faceless jurisdiction, of compliance of at least the direct tax law. There is also a proposal to make faceless law applicable to GST compliances, that is assessment and appeal, etc. So maybe in a couple of years' time, even GST will become faceless in assessments and appeal. Let us go by the initial stages. Increasing the importance of effective drafting in the present day situation. What is so different in the current day situation that we must improve our drafting. We must improve our drafting skill. The first thing, not directly related to our tax practice, if we are in the tax practice, if most of you, but the increasing civil litigation. Friends, if you Google, you will find if you Google, you will find that the litigation in India with various courts is soaring high and high and high. Recently, I heard an interview of the retired Chief Justice of India, I think Justice Bobde or Justice, I forgot the name, and he said that there is a total pendency of over 4 crore cases in Indian judiciary. Over 4 crore cases in Indian judiciary. And it takes several years in disposal of these litigations. Most of these litigations, which are pending in the courts of law, are civil litigations, and most of the civil litigations are arising on account of poor drafting of contracts. So we can say that if the drafting is done properly, we can avoid so many litigations, or even if the litigation is there, we can avoid at least in delay in disposal of the same. So that is the fundamental thing which is required for a good drafting of the documents, which may ultimately lead to civil litigations. On the direct tax front, there is increasing reduction of human interface at various levels. As we all know, initially the government a couple of years back started experimenting with faceless assessment or e-assessment. Then e-assessment was converted into faceless assessment. And now the faceless appeal has started from, I think, 25th of September last year. And now even the tribunal will become faceless. So when faceless thing is the call of the day, we need to be very cautious about effective drafting. Because friends, if you try to analyze one thing, you can just experiment with yourself. That you just write down something and then try to convince what you have written by oral argument. And you will know that when you try to convince something with the help of oral argument, you will be arguing so many things which are not mentioned in the written text. So, under normal circumstances, in the earlier era, where physical hearings used to take place, all our thrust was partly on written text and partly on oral arguments. And with the combination of written and oral arguments, we used to get through in assessment or in appeal or in tribunal, that is second appeal, and so on and so forth. Now with faceless, the oral argument part is getting eliminated completely. When you cannot orally argue, or when you are not even aware as to who is the recipient of the documents being uploaded by you on the departmental portal, you need to convey everything on paper by drafting a proper written submission or by placing the relevant documents at a proper place in the paper book you filed. So that is the art which is going to be very crucial now. And friends, let me tell you one thing, as somebody told about the farm laws, that with the farm laws implementation, the chartered accountants may have a very crucial role to play, in the sense that they would be required to draft various contracts between the farmers and the industries entering into contract with the farmers. In the same way, if I put in a different context, the litigation practice of income tax is predominantly being controlled by advocates. Especially if you go to tribunal, you will find, like in Ahmedabad tribunal, I'm not aware of Surat tribunal, but if you go to Ahmedabad tribunal, you will find that out of 10 persons, 10 professionals arguing the case, 7 would be advocates and only 3 would be chartered accountants. Or even chartered accountants would be practicing as advocate. Like Saurav Soparkar is a chartered accountant, but he's practicing as advocate. Tushar Hemani is a chartered accountant practicing as advocate. So advocates are controlling substantially the litigative practice of direct tax and even of indirect tax. But if you look into the way the advocates practice and the way we chartered accountants practice as chartered accountants, you will find a stark difference. The advocates tend to rely more on the provisions of law rather than relying on the facts of the case. The advocates at appellate side, especially in tribunal and above, rely more on the documents and the written submissions prepared by the chartered accountant at the time of assessment or at the level of CIT appeal, and they will just carry forward their oral argument on the basis of what has already been submitted at the lower level. Whereas we as chartered accountant have got a flair of drafting. So we are definitely better at drafting the written submissions. We are definitely better at interpreting the provisions of law. We are definitely better at interpreting the factual aspect. Like there is a case of search or there is a case of survey. In that case, there'll be a lot of seized material, there'll be a lot of impounded materials, and the factual gamut of all these documents is required to be interpreted in such a way that the reader of the written submission, that is the assessing officer or CIT appeal or even the tribunal in due course of time thereafter, they understand the things in proper perspective. This particular part of interpretation of the documents and of convincing the other person as to the validity of a particular point of view is definitely better with a practicing chartered accountant and not with a practicing advocate. Because we, as a matter of policy, we thrust more on the facts. The advocates have more thrust on the law. So with the change in scenario, when everything is required to be properly drafted, we can definitely have an edge over the practicing advocates, because who may not be good at proper drafting, who are good at proper arguments, but then now arguments are not required to be made at all. So in that situation, we can try to take advantage of the situation and develop or grow our practice accordingly. One more thing about the proper drafting is about the rules of additional evidences. Friends, I would be switching between assessment and appeal as I progress. As you all must be knowing that the income tax law says that when in appeal, whether before CIT appeal or before the tribunal, you cannot supplement your argument by filing additional evidences. So you need to rely only on those evidences, those papers, those documents, those account copies which have already been filed at the time of assessment. And if you want to say that, sir, these documents were not filed before the assessing officer, and you file it for the first time before CIT appeal in appeal, or if you file it for the first time before the Income Tax Appellate Tribunal in second appeal, what will be the fate of that? As per Rule 46A of the Income Tax Rules, or as per Rule 29 of the Income Tax Appellate Tribunal Rules, at the threshold, the appellate authority would say that we will not admit additional evidences. And in order to get the additional evidences, you will need to prove that you were genuinely prevented from filing these documents at the original level. I'll come to this in greater detail in the next couple of slides. But the main thing is you need to be very sure as to what documents are to be filed, what evidences are required to be filed, and what written submission to be filed at the very stage of assessment, so that if some additions are being made by the assessing officer, and if you are happen to go to the appellate level, you are not required to file any additional evidences, and you can complete your argument exclusively on the basis of the documents which are very much available on the record of the assessing officer. So that is the primary thing we have to take extreme care of. Let me deal with the last bullet, dynamic jurisdiction. You have any idea what is dynamic jurisdiction? Let us do some interaction. Have you heard the name dynamic jurisdiction? Okay. See, the government is very smart. While Nirmala Sitharaman on 1st of February spoke of her intention of converting the entire income tax appellate tribunal into faceless proceedings, she very well knew that particular lobby will definitely challenge this decision by filing a writ petition either in the High Court or in the Supreme Court. Okay, because one line of thinking against the faceless appellate proceedings is this, that when you go faceless, you cannot have oral arguments. And if you cannot orally argue your case before the appellate authority, your right of being heard, which is enshrined in the Constitution of India, is being adversely affected. So as we all know, Constitution is the boss of everything. Constitution is supreme. Every single act, whether passed by the central government or by state government or by the local bodies, they are all subordinate to the Constitution of India. So you cannot have any act, even if passed by entire majority, which is unconstitutional in nature. Okay, which is unconstitutional in nature. So suppose the government came out with faceless tribunal and somebody knocks the door of the High Court or the Supreme Court that this is unconstitutional. And if the Supreme Court knocks down that provision, then the government will be reduced to the traditional tribunal proceedings. So in order to ensure that this does not happen, Nirmala Sitharaman declared that we will also have provision of dynamic jurisdiction. Now, what is dynamic jurisdiction? Friends, if you think of a situation 5 years back or 4 years back, you must be telling that since I am staying in Varacha Road, my jurisdictional assessing officer is, say, ITO Ward 11 Surat. Okay, so you have a jurisdictional income tax officer. So he would be assessing all the income tax returns with address of Varacha Road. Is it correct? Okay. Similarly, you go to CIT appeal, then CIT appeal jurisdiction was also very much defined. That if you are based in Surat and this particular part of Surat, maybe your case will fall within the jurisdiction of, say, CIT appeal 1 Surat. In another area, it will be under CIT appeal 2 Surat. and so on and so forth. So there is a jurisdiction of CIT appeal also. Same thing is for tribunal. If you are in Surat, all your appeals will fall before ITAT Surat. If I'm based in Ahmedabad, all my appeals will fall within the jurisdiction of ITAT Ahmedabad. What is dynamic? Dynamic means you do not have a specific assignment as to your assessing officer, as to your CIT appeal, or as to your tribunal. Means what? That suppose for some reason it is not possible for the department to conduct faceless hearing either before CIT appeal or before the tribunal, and they have to carry out the face-to-face hearing. In that case, she declared that if this happens, then the tribunal hearings will be having dynamic jurisdiction. Dynamic jurisdiction means what? Like I'm sitting in Ahmedabad, so normally all my cases which are based in Ahmedabad or Saurashtra, other than Rajkot on that side, or Bhavnagar. So Bhavnagar, Baroda, Ahmedabad, Nadiad, Himmatnagar, all these areas fall under the jurisdiction of Ahmedabad Tribunal. Now Ahmedabad Tribunal has got 4 benches, A, B, C, D. And each bench has got 2 members, one accountant member, one judicial member. So there are just 8 posting of members in Ahmedabad Tribunal. Surat, I think only 1 bench is there. So only 2 members are there. So whenever you go to tribunal to argue a case, you know that till those members are transferred, only they are going to be sitting on the dais, and they are going to give you hearing and to take a call final. So there'll be one-to-one contact possible in specific assigned jurisdiction of litigation. But with dynamic jurisdiction, what will happen? She said that even if the hearing is required to be conducted face-to-face in tribunal, it will be virtual, that is number 1. It will not be physical. So there will be virtual hearing, and that virtual hearing will take place with dynamic jurisdiction. Means what? Maybe after a year or so, after 2 years or so, when this comes into effect, I open my Zoom application to argue a particular case. My case is that of a client based in, say, Ahmedabad. Is an Ahmedabad-based client. I am going to conduct his case as authorized representative. I log in the particular website, open the ITAT box, and I find right at 10:30 in the morning that one member is sitting in Lucknow, the other member is maybe sitting in Chennai. Okay, that is dynamic jurisdiction. So it is now not necessary that the hearing of an Ahmedabad case, even at the level of tribunal, will be heard only by the members sitting in Ahmedabad. They may be sitting anywhere in India. So even if faceless does not come into being, this is going to be the rule of the day, dynamic jurisdiction. Friends, you must be knowing even these days in scrutiny assessment, faceless assessment, you don't know who is the officer passing the assessment order. You don't know who is going to read the written submission you file. The other day I was told by somebody that when you receive a notice under 142(1), there is a name at the end of the notice, digitally signed by Mr. So-and-so. Okay, digitally signed by Mr. So-and-so. So probably that is the name of the assessing officer who may have uploaded the notice on your web portal, which you are now responding to. But friends, if you go to the procedure of e-assessment, faceless e-assessment or faceless e-appeal, you will find that the person having issued a notice, the assessing officer having issued a notice, does not have power of passing the assessment order. So notice is issued by Officer A, maybe based in Delhi. When you file the written submission there against, the notice and the written submission will go to another assessing officer, maybe based in Chennai. If he wants to pass the assessment order on the basis of what you have submitted, he'll prepare a draft assessment order, get that approved. If he wants further queries to be raised, he would issue another notice, and that will go to the response will go to a third assessing officer, maybe sitting in Calcutta, and so on and so forth. So with all these, your only thrust will be on effective drafting of written submissions. And unless and until that drafting is not properly done, it would be extremely difficult to have favorable response. Friends, one more thing in this regard, you must have noticed that the faceless e-assessments orders have started pouring in now. And you must have noticed that in most of the cases, the faceless assessment center is not making any addition. Have you come across any case of very huge addition? No, right? Even I have not come across. Practically almost in all assessments, if you make proper written submissions, assessment is being accepted at returned income, no adverse view is being taken. Why? Probably because the government is experimenting with a new technique, and government wants to ensure that people do not challenge the efficacy of faceless e-assessment by filing a writ petition. They don't want litigation in this regard. So maybe unofficially they have given some instructions to the departmental officers that at least in the initial couple of years, try to be very lenient, unless and until there is a definite reason for making any addition, the addition should not be made. But friends, this is not going to continue for longer period of time. Once faceless gets established, they are going to be stricter, and once they become stricter, we are going to be required to be very vigilant in what we submit and what we do not submit. So in this context, let us go by the basics of good drafting. What are the basics of good drafting? Just a minute, I'll shift. To identify the purpose of drafting and the skill level of the persons who are going to read and interpret the same. This is the first and foremost thing that is required to be done by us. We must know as to who is going to be reading the written submission being filed by us. Now, friends, like you are based in Surat, and if you are dealing with assessment of a diamond manufacturer, let us go by this, a diamond manufacturer, so you know the ins and outs of diamond manufacturing industry, that raw material is being acquired or is being purchased or is being imported, then it is to be polished, and so many. I don't know anything about that. Like I have my office in Bhavnagar also, so I know about shipbreaking. So I know about the peculiarity of the shipbreaking industry, which is very peculiar. That old and discarded ship is being imported and then cut. What is the way of cutting? They use oxygen gas, they use LPG gas. Now, if I am dealing with an assessing officer based in that local jurisdiction, for all probability, even the assessing officer would be knowing the technicalities of that industry. Like in your case, Surat, if you have a special jurisdiction assigned to diamond manufacturing industry, as is the common case in Ahmedabad in earlier years, that there used to be professional circle, there used to be transport circle, like that. So if there is a diamond circle in the income tax office, then there would be a particular assessing officer, a particular additional commissioner above him, who would be continuously assessing the cases of all diamond manufacturers. Okay, in that case, it would be very easy for us to convince him as to the modus operandi being adopted by the SSE while carrying out his business. Same thing for shipbreaking, same thing for rolling mill, same thing for any other industry, same thing for salt manufacturing. Okay. So, but when you are dealing with assessment by drafting written submissions, which is to be read by a faceless assessing officer who may be sitting in Guwahati, who may be sitting in Kashmir, who may be sitting in Delhi, who may be sitting anywhere in India. He may not be aware of shipbreaking industry, may not be aware of diamond industry, may not be aware of textile industry. Okay, he would not be knowing anything about that. If an assessing officer is sitting somewhere in Kanpur, he may not be aware of all these things. So while making effective drafting or your written submission, you need to understand that you are addressing your communication to a person who knows absolutely nothing or who probably knows absolutely nothing about the industry the SSE is carrying on his business from. So first try to identify the purpose of drafting and the skill level of the person. So you need to understand a couple of things. The first thing is to go by presumption that in faceless, the recipient assessing officer or the recipient CIT appeal would not have any idea about the industry the SSE is engaged in. That is number one. Number two, you are not even aware from notice under 142.1, you must have noticed. It mentions income tax officer, stroke assistant commissioner, stroke deputy commissioner, stroke joint commissioner, stroke additional commissioner. Now, income tax officer is a class 2 very junior officer of the income tax department who may have been just promoted from the post of inspector. He may not be good at English. He may not be good at tax. He may not have exposure in the particular industry. He may be completely new. Or he may be an additional commissioner who would be quite senior, would be quite seasoned, would be doing good amount of law, but you do not know who is going to read your written submission. So in order to make effective drafting, you need to make sure that whatever you draft is very easy to understand. That is one thing. And at the same time is very effective. It has to be very effective in nature. You cannot draft a communication treating the assessing officer as a person without brain, but at the same time, you cannot at the same time draft a written submission thinking that the assessing officer is super smart. So you have to maintain a balance between the two while making effective drafting. It may be a good idea to give a background. Now, what is the good way of drafting? Friends, I have seen, because I am predominantly engaged in appellate practice for the last so many years, a couple of decades rather, and I have seen, because so many cases come to me which are argued by other chartered accountants at lower levels. A very common practice is something like this. If you go to the written submission, let me just take an illustration. If the question is, kindly furnish details of your business activities. Answer, as mentioned in the return, the SSE is engaged in the business of diamond manufacturing. Number two, kindly give confirmation of the unsecured loan you may have accepted attached herewith. Answer would be attached herewith. Question 3, kindly give calculation of gross profit and net profit earned during the course of the year and its comparison with the immediately preceding financial year. And justify the same. Charts attached herewith. In most of the cases, you will find that the front page of the written submission or the covering letter of the paper book, does not contain any relevant details. Does not contain any relevant details. Like if you say the SSC is engaged in business of diamond manufacturing. Now that may be forthcoming even from the name of the industry, or that may have been mentioned even in the income tax return, or 3CD, nature of business. What you are required to mention there, you need to be slightly elaborate. You need to slightly elaborate, like suppose in shipbreaking. I'm speaking of shipbreaking because I'm more conversant with that business. So I would say that the SSC is engaged in the business of shipbreaking, operating from so and so. I would also say that in the business of shipbreaking, the SSC import purchases old and discarded marine vessels from the international market. Okay, I would also give slight detail about the shipbreaking business. I would say that there are as many as 70,000-80,000 ships plying on the international waters, and 80,000 marine vessels plying in the international waters, and each vessel is normally having a lifespan of 25 to 30 years. So 80,000 divided by 30. So those many ships are required to be dismantled every year. Those many ships are required to be dismantled every year. Then there is a maritime law, international law, that those ships cannot be dismantled in the sea because that will pollute the sea. So for that purpose, I would say that government of Gujarat has developed a shipbreaking plot in Bhavnagar. Okay, and Gujarat government through Gujarat Maritime Board has allotted the shipbreaking plots under a lease agreement to various parties. So as part of that, the SSC has also got allotment of so and so plot. The ships are always purchased from international market. So they are being imported. When you import something, it has to be subjected to payment of customs duty. I would mention that also. I would say that the purchase is made by establishing letter of credit from the bank. So I complied with the banking law. I complied with the Reserve Bank law. I complied with the custom duty law. I complied with the excise law. Everything I would mention. Okay. And then I'll switch to second question. Say unsecured loan. Now, as you all know, when we accept unsecured loan, we are required to prove through three things. Which are the three things? Identity, creditworthiness, and genuineness. Okay, these are the three ingredients required to be proved. Identity of the cash creditor, the person who may have given us money, his creditworthiness, and genuineness of the transaction. Unless and until we prove all three, the case will fall under section 68. And if it falls under section 68, it will trigger 115 BBE. So that will trigger in the tax being levied at the rate of 78%. So instead of mentioning, when you say attached herewith, the assessing officer first will get irritated, especially when you have submitted something online in faceless. He'll have to scroll pages in order to ensure that which are the pages that contain the confirmation of the parties. What I would mention, or what we all must mention, I would say that at the outset, it is placed on record that the undersigned has accepted certain loans from various parties, the full and complete details of which can be had from annexure so and so, forming part of the tax report in form number 3CD, uploaded on the departmental portal. This is number one. Number two, I would say it may additionally be submitted that every single loan is accepted from various parties which are very much assessed to tax, and the same have been accepted by proper banking channel without violating any of the provisions of the law. Third, I would say self-explanatory copy of confirmations in respect of each of these parties, which includes the confirmations include the full name and address of the parties, their PAN numbers, the amount and the mode of receipt of the loan, and the amount and mode of repayment of the loan, the amount of interest paid, the rate at which the interest is paid, the amount of TDS made, and the signature of the person in token of his having confirmed the transactions are attached herewith, and they form part of the paper book at page numbers this to this. I would number the entire paper book, and I would say the confirmations are from this to this. Now, friends, suppose you have 50 depositors in your list. 50 depositors in your list. It's quite possible that you may be very confident about the fulfillment of all three conditions with reference to 40, and you may have some doubt about the remaining 10. If you make your return submission, the forwarding letter, a very well drafted, and all 50 are attached to that paper book in such a way that the ITO will flip through the pages and will go through the initial confirmations, which are very strong, or the last confirmations, which are again very strong. And the doubtful things are placed somewhere in between. 1 to 50, 1 to 20, very strong, maybe 21, 22, little doubtful, 23, 20 to 30, strong, then couple of doubtful. In that situation, for all probability, the assessing officer is not going to go through every single document you file. He would also go by test checking. He would go by test checking, because the moment he reads the forwarding letter, the moment he reads the drafting of the forwarding letter, he would just have an impression. The first impression is always the last impression, as they say. He would always carry an impression that this return submission is prepared with utmost care. There is not likely to be any lapse in that. And he will just go by a couple of confirmations. If he is satisfied with the couple of, he probably would not even look into the remaining confirmations, and he will be through with that. So when you draft the forwarding letter or the covering letter, you need to elaborate that in a very proper way. Friends, in number of chartered accountants offices, I have noticed that in order to reduce the burden of the main person, like if I am too busy, I don't have time in dictating the written submission all by myself. So what I would do, I would ask my juniors to draft the forwarding letter. But then I have my doubt that my juniors may not be good at drafting. They do not know proper English. So I would just ask my junior, एक कर दो, तुम बाकी के पेपर्स लगा दो साथ में और उसमें अटैच कर देना. So the covering letter will be a very short one. When the covering letter only says that confirmations attached here with, assessing officer will be forced to go into each of the confirmations which are filed with that, in order to ensure that they are full, they are complete, they contain everything. If something is mentioned in the covering letter, probably he would not be required to do that. So make it a point that the text of the forwarding letter is very apt and very self-explanatory in nature. So make it self-explanatory. Command over the language, that is the prerequisite. Every one of us will have to develop that command. Clarity as to the facts and law with proper thrust to both. Now, friends, I remember when I was a very junior, I started my practice. At that time, there used to be special range. Now there is central circle for search cases. In those days, there used to be special range. And I was told in the beginning of my career by a particular additional commissioner, पोपट साहब आप फैक्ट्स में तो बहुत तैयारी करते हो, लॉ में क्यों ध्यान नहीं रखते हो? This was the in a friendly way. पोपट साहब आप फैक्ट्स में तो बहुत तैयारी करते हो, लॉ में क्यों ध्यान नहीं रखते हो? Friends, we need to understand that we need to focus both on facts and law up to the level of tribunal, up to which we would be practicing. Because High Court is not our domain, that will go to the advocate concerned. So the tribunal is last fact-finding authority. So take it assessing officer or CIT appeal or tribunal. They all deal both with the facts and the law. And you need to understand as to which is of greater importance in a particular case, of greater importance in a particular case. So at times, there may be a situation where you may be very weak at facts, very weak at facts. Say, in case of search and survey, where bogus billing has been carried out by a person, if there is a search conducted at the premises of a person and he was found to be indulging in billing activities and all documentary evidences are found, and you are dealing with that in assessment or in appeal. Now, if you try to argue the case in my profit and loss account, in the return of income furnished by that assessee, there'll be purchase and sale. You understand? He's doing billing. But profit and loss account shows that he has made purchases of 100 crore and sale of 105 crore. So there is a GP of 5 crores of rupees. And out of that GP of 5 crore, he has incurred expenses of say 4 crore. So net profit is 1 crore. This is the return of income, say for assessment year 16-17, which has been reopened post survey or post search. Okay. And in the finding of search, there is a clear-cut admission on the part of the assessee that he has done only billing activities. He neither purchased anything nor sold anything. What will be your line of argument? Would you continue with your stand, which was taken while furnishing your return of income? Or would you like to take a U-turn and switch to what was admitted during the course of survey? You need to take a call. You need to take a call. In this situation, what we in legal terminology called alternative arguments. We give alternative arguments, and in alternative arguments, we say assuming though not admitting about something. Assuming though not admitting about something. I would say that if you treat my transactions as a genuine transactions of purchase and sales, if my transaction is genuine transaction of purchase and genuine transaction of sale, in that case, the profitability shown in the books of account is quite sufficient, quite fantastic, because I purchased materials worth 100 crore, sold it for 105 crore. So there is a GP of 5%. There is a gross profit margin of 5%, which is fantastic in a wholesale trading of a particular product. Okay. If I say that, let us assume without my admitting that what was stated by me in the course of survey is correct even with reference to this particular assessment year. I would say what I said in survey was in the context of assessment year 1920 or 2021 in which the survey took place. But let us assume that I was doing the same thing even in relation to assessment 16-17, which is being subjected to reassessment now. Even in that situation, if I have not purchased anything, if I have not sold anything, what I have done? I've just done paper transactions. If I have done paper transactions, what I can earn is only a small commission income in between. If I can earn only a commission income in between, and if that commission income is, or the estimated commission income is less than my returned income, no addition can be made. When there is a judgment of Rajasthan High Court in the case of Gotan Line Khanij Udyog, Rajasthan High Court, it says that even after rejection of the books of account, even if the books are rejected by the assessing officer for a valid reason, that does not mean that the returned income has to be subjected to some addition. So there can be a case of rejection of books of account without any addition to the returned income. So I would go a legal way in a situation like this. I would say that assuming though not admitting about my having carried out only billing activities, and thus my purchase not being my purchase and my sale not being my sale, even in that situation, what you can do, you can at the most do is rejection of my books of account. But even after rejection of my books of account, you as assessing officer will be forced to estimate my income. And that estimation of my income has to be made with reference to the nature of activity carried out by me, that is commission income. And if my returned income is higher than that, no addition can be made. So this would be a pure legal argument that you cannot make an addition even after rejection of my books of account. So I need to take care while drafting as to whether I am required to put greater thrust on facts or greater thrust on law, or partial thrust on fact and partial thrust on law. Ideally, it would be the third thing in most of the cases. We need to take care of this. To be in a position to explain just from the written text and without supplementing anything further to it. And this is just for, as I already discussed earlier, just do it for yourself. Suppose, don't do it for income tax purposes. I give you a small illustration. તમે કોઈ એક picture જોયું. You are all Gujaratis, right? Okay. તમે કોઈ એક picture જોયું. તમને બહુ ગમ્યું. એ પિક્ચરની સ્ટોરી તમે કાગળ પર લખવા ટ્રાય કરો. This would be the best way of, you do it in Gujarati, you do it in Hindi, you do it in English, in whatever language you feel fit. તમે એ પિક્ચરની સ્ટોરીને તમે એ કાગળ પર પહેલા લખી નાખો અને એ કાગળ તમે તમારા સામેની કોઈ વ્યક્તિને આપો. You keep one copy with you, with one copy to the other person, to a person who has not seen that movie. To a person who has not seen that movie. Okay. અને પછી તમે એ જ વસ્તુને તમે બોલીને try to tell him the story orally with a condition. તમારે એવી કોઈ પણ વસ્તુ નહીં બોલવાની જે વસ્તુ કાગળમાં લખેલી નથી. નવા ફેક્ટ્સ ના આવવા જોઈએ. You cannot add any new facts into your arguments. You can elaborate that in whatever way you feel. You elaborate that, but you don't have to add new facts. Friends, you try it, you will feel that 99% of the cases you will fail. 99% of the cases you will fail because we have a tendency of blending our written argument with our oral arguments. That blending will no longer work in faceless assessment. Now, whatever you want to say has to be said in the form of the written text, in the form of drafting. So once you try to develop this skill, that you can argue something exclusively on the basis of the written text without supplementing anything from outside, you cannot make a good drafting. This is an experiment you need to do with every subject. So don't start with income tax, just start with something else, a movie or a novel or any other matter for that. And you will gradually realize that you give thrust to so many new things which are not put on paper. So that has to be avoided. Then brevity with precision. What is brevity? Friends, I did my chartered accountancy in 1984. And in 1982-83, when I did my inter-CA, at that time we used to have inter-CA, there used to be a subject called Organization and Management, O&M. If some senior chartered accountant is there in the audience, they would immediately remember this. In our chartered accountancy paper, in CA question paper, they used to write, the institute used to write one sentence in the instructions. Marks are reserved for brevity. Marks are reserved for brevity. Brevity means brief. Marks are reserved for brevity. If you are brief, if the question is having 20 marks, and normally we would go by presumption, okay, 20 mark no question che, so we must write at least four pages. It's not that. Our institute in those days used to write in that OM paper as an instruction, marks are reserved for brevity. So you don't have to write essays and essays to respond to a particular question asked in the question paper. If you are brief but precise, that goes a long way. In English, I think in school time you must have learned précis. Précis ભણ્યા છે આપણે નહીં કોઈ. I mean, we used to learn that. What is précis? There is a full long text. We used to read it, and we were required to reduce that to a size of say 1/3 or 1/4 or 1/5, as the case may be. So if it's a 500-word document, you read it twice, you read it thrice, and you reduce that 500-word document into a document of 150 words. But while reducing that 500 words to 150 words, you need to ensure that you do not miss out any relevant information. You do not miss out any relevant information. That is art of drafting. Okay, that is art of drafting. So you need to master that art of drafting. Then comes cross-referencing as and when so needed. Cross-referencing is again of very importance. Normally, we do, especially in appellate side, we do cross-referencing in two ways. First is by making index. Tribunal index is compulsory. Whenever we file a paper book in tribunal, there has to be an index. We need to give a small brief description with page numbers from and to. So like there'll be 4 columns: serial number, particulars, page from, and page to. So I would say written submission filed before the assessing officer, page number 1 to page number 30. Number 2, confirmation in respect of unsecured loans, page number 31 to page number 50, and so on and so forth. So that is cross-referencing by way of index. But even beyond index, how to give cross-referencing? Whenever you file a written submission, the covering letter, and in covering letter is mentioned that this is attached herewith. Just in the margin, on the right-hand side margin of the page, you just note down the page numbers. So if in the written submission, as I was talking earlier, if you are giving written submission in the connection with, say, unsecured loans, that you say self-explanatory copies are attached herewith, then on the right-hand side margin, you just mention page number this to this, if it is not mentioned in the text itself. So that cross-referencing will also go a long way in reducing the effort of the assessing officer. And if he feels very comfortable with your presentation style, he would have confidence in your preparedness, and he would feel that this person is very meticulous. He would not have committed any mistake, and he would increase his test checking. So earlier, maybe he would be checking 70% of the documents, but with confidence, maybe he can check only 10% of documents and believe the rest of the 90% as correct. So cross-referencing may also be very crucial in drafting the written submission. Increasing shift from oral arguments to written submissions with documentary evidences. Again, it is repetition, so I'm not taking larger time in this particular slide. The increasing importance of documented arguments in the form of text and accompanying evidences in comparison to oral. And this is extremely important. Dealing with these I already covered. Now I come to the additional evidences. Friends, in most of the cases, when we do not file proper documentary evidences, and it goes to an appellate forum, or even if it does not go to the appellate forum, but it goes to, say, AG audit, it goes to the audit. Recently, I was coming across a particular case. I was approached a particular case in which the SSC had mentioned it was a physical hearing carried out by the assessing officer, physical hearing. And in the physical hearing, AO had asked that justify your claim of expenditure in connection with the following expense head. Okay, justify or claim of expenditure in connection with the following expense head. And the reply went something like this, that I am producing herewith the complete books of account for your verification. I am producing herewith the complete books of account for your verification, and it can be said from the same. It can be seen from the same that every single expenditure is properly documented and justified and incurred for the purpose of business, so rightly claimed in the return of income. Nothing was attached with the paper book. Okay, nothing was attached with the paper book. He said, I'm producing everything before your honor. I'm producing the books of account, I'm producing the vouchers, I'm producing the files. You just verified for yourself. Everything is there in this. And the AG audit raised an audit objection. AG audit raised an audit objection because AG people go to the income tax office for conducting audit after the assessment is completed. Now, how do they verify the books of account and documents that were only produced and taken back? They were produced and taken back. Friends, in faceless era, this is not even possible. So in order to see, okay, in another extreme, it may not be possible for you to file, to upload every single document on the portal in connection with all the expenses you may have incurred, or in connection with confirmation of all the deposits, in connection with every single transaction. So better course is you give brief description in the write-up as to each of the major heads of expenses, major head of income, and whatever is relevant in the balance sheet. Okay, whatever is relevant in the balance sheet. So like on credit side, liability side of the balance sheet, you have to deal with the unsecured loans. You have to deal with secured loans. When you deal with secured loans, you have also to deal with the security offered. When you deal with the security offered, suppose it is against hypothecation of stock. Hypothecation of stock. Then what was the stock reflected in your balance sheet? And what is the stock as given in the stock statement submitted to the bank? This issue will come up especially in a situation where your say CC limit, cash credit limit outstanding is 10 crore of rupees and you are showing stock of just 8 crore of rupees. You understand? You need to go through all these details in minute details. When you say okay, the CC limit is availed only against hypothecation of stock and nothing else, if there is no hypothecation of debtors, let us presume. In that situation, if outstanding of CC is 10 crore, for all probability, you would have given a stock statement to the bank showing stock of maybe 13 crore, 14 crore, 15 crore. And as per the books of account, the stock is just of 8 crore rupees. There will be a clear-cut contradiction. So whenever you find such contradictions, you need to clarify that in the written submission. You can say like in a specific case, you can say that though the outstanding in the cash credit limit as per the books of account is shown at 10 crore of rupees, the same is subject to reconciliation, which is attached here with at page number so and so. And it can be seen from the reconciliation statement that the actual exposure of the CC on the balance sheet date was only of 7 crore of rupees, and the checks for remaining amount were lying in the reconciliation at the relevant point of time. If you clarify that by thinking a couple of steps much in advance, you will be avoiding so many litigations or maybe reopening arising on account of audit objections. And you must have noticed now in the current year's finance bill, you must have studied. Now from next year onwards, the case can be reopened predominantly only on two situations. Which are the two situations? One situation is if the assessing officer has got some specific information based on the risk criteria framed by the government. So that will be online thing. they are linking various transactions. Suppose in one of my budget speeches, I'd given a small illustrations as somebody introduced myself, me, that I have undertaken so many foreign travels. Now, suppose my scrutiny assessment, not scrutiny, my return of income being furnished is being processed by CBDT or is processed by CPC. Now the government is sitting on huge pile of data gathered from various sources. They look into my income tax return or my balance sheet or my profit and loss account, my capital account, that I have made withdrawal only of 50,000 rupees for the entire year. Try to understand, I made cash withdrawal of how much? Only 50,000 rupees in the entire year. But from some other department, they got the information that during that very financial year, I'd gone out of India for 2 months. I'd gone out of India for 2 months. Or that I purchased a BMW car. From third source, they got information that I purchased a BMW car. Or from fourth information, they got information that I purchased a piece of land or a bungalow or a flat. Or I have paid certain amount to a club, Karnavati club. Now, they would make risk assessment of all these information put together. They would think that a person having traveled abroad for 2 months, the person having purchased a BMW car, the person having purchased a bungalow, the person having purchased membership of Karnavati club cannot be living with a household expenditure just of 50,000 rupees. This would be the reason for my case being reopened. This would be a reason for my case being reopened. So they do not have reason to believe about my income having escaped assessment now. From next year, it is no longer required. The traditional way of 147 will not work now. The entire section is being replaced by a new section. Now, under the new provisions of section 147, the reopening is permissible only in two situations. One situation, one like this, and the second situation when the audit objection, the final audit objection is received by the income tax department. Then based on that final audit objection, the case can be reopened. So in order to ensure that we do not fit into any of the two categories of revised norms of reopening, when I'm deviating from drafting, but just look into the new sections which are sought to be introduced now, 147, 148, 149, and 150. The new sections, the old sections name. Don't look into the income tax, look into the budget, finance bill, and read the new sections, and you will come to know as to in which circumstances the case can be reopened now from next year onwards. And that can be reopened only for 3 years. So in order to see that a situation like this does not apply, when you file return submission, will you prepare notes on account in the balance sheet? Even that is drafting. Even that requires a good drafting, because as we all know, though we are statutory auditors to so many entities, but we help them out even in preparing the notes on account. So if you clarify certain things in the notes on account, that will go a long way in avoiding reopening at a subsequent stage. So all these things have to be properly taken care of. Regarding the additional evidences, as I already discussed earlier, there are two specific rules. Rule 46A of the Income Tax Rules 1962 and Rule 29 of the Income Tax Appellate Tribunal Rules 1963. They say that under normal circumstances, the appellate authority cannot entertain admission of an additional evidence which was not filed before the lower level. There are exceptions to that, but in order to prove that the case falls under that exception, you need to prove that. And even if you prove that, suppose you file an additional evidence before CIT appeal, and that particular document was not filed before the assessing officer when the assessment was completed. In that case, for all probability, the CIT appeal will be forced to send the entire written submission to the assessing officer under what is called remand proceedings. What is remand proceedings? Because assessing officer has got no power of setting aside the assessment, so he will keep the assessment, the appellate proceedings with himself pending, and he will send the entire written submission to the AO for his comments. AO will make necessary inquiries with reference to the written submission you may have filed with the appellate authority, send his report to the CIT appeal, which is called a remand report. CIT appeal in turn will give a copy of that remand report to you so as to enable you to file a rejoinder to the remand report. And after going through all these documentary evidences, he will take a call. If the matter is before the tribunal, tribunal has got a power of setting aside. So if you prove that the additional evidence being filed for the first time before the tribunal is required to be admitted in view of the special circumstances that prevailed, tribunal cannot take suo motu decision with reference to the additional evidences generally. So in all such matters, tribunal would say, okay, we admit the additional evidences, but आप कहाँ वापस जाना चाहते हो? This is a very common question being asked by the member. कहाँ जाना है? So we say, sir, we want to go back to AO, or we say we want to go back to CIT appeal, and the matter will be set aside either before AO or before CIT appeal, as the case may be. So in order to see that all these procedures are not unnecessarily being carried out, we need to ensure that while filing the written submission, we make a foolproof written submission and we give all documentary evidences at that very stage. What constitutes and what does not constitute additional evidence? It's a very clear thing. Whenever some factual documents are being filed, like confirmation of depositors or sale deed or purchase deed or ledger account copy, they are all evidences, and if not filed before the AO, that will constitute additional evidence at the level of CIT appeal. But the elaboration of the written submission at appellate level does not constitute additional evidences if you are not taking a U-turn. Similarly, if you are filing or relying on the ratio of judgments of high courts or tribunal or Supreme Court, they never constitute additional evidence. So even if a particular judgment has not been cited either before AO or before CIT appeal, you can cite it before the tribunal. That does not constitute additional evidences, and you don't have to seek permission from that. Similarly, reliance on the provisions of law, even at a later stage in appeal, does not constitute additional evidences. You may not have argued on a particular line of argument while interpreting a particular section. If you do that in appeal, it does not constitute additional evidences. So you need to identify this while determining as to what constitutes additional evidences. Drafting of written submissions to be filed with the AO or CIT appeal. I think this I have already covered, so I'm skipping that for want of time so that we can have more time for discussion of something else. Drafting while responding to summons and show cause notice, etc. Friends, a couple of things here. In most of the cases, we go by a presumption that whenever the assessing officer calls for something, we must respond to the same. Now, what is a summon? Let us try to understand. If you go through 131, section 131, 131 says, 131.1, etc., the section says that the assessing officer can issue a summon to an assessee. He can also issue a summon to a witness. He can issue a summon to SSE, he can issue a summon to witness as well. And it further says that when the assessing officer is issuing a summon to a witness, the assessing officer shall have all the powers which are vested with a judicial magistrate while trying a suit in a code of civil procedure. While trying a suit in a code of civil procedure. That means that કોર્ટના મેજિસ્ટ્રેટને વિટનેસને સમન કરવાના જે પાવર્સ છે એ જ પાવર્સ આઈટીઓને વિટનેસને સમન્સ કરવામાં છે. Now if you go to Code of Civil Procedure, you will find that the magistrate cannot issue a summon to a witness, not to SSE, I'm talking about the witness. A magistrate cannot issue a summon to a witness if the distance between the address of the court and the address of that witness is of more than 500 kilometers. Is more than 500 kilometers, with an exception that if the distance is more than 500 kilometers, the magistrate has to see whether there is a direct air connectivity between the two places or not. Like suppose you are sitting in Surat. You are sitting in Surat and you received a summon as witness in somebody else's case who is being assessed in Delhi. Now, what is the distance between Delhi and Surat? Is it more than 500 kilometers? Yes. Then the Delhi assessing officer, Delhi investigation officer cannot call your presence by issuing a summon in Delhi without providing you with returned air ticket. Okay, so if there is air connectivity, he has to give air ticket along with the summons, otherwise he cannot call. Now friends, while drafting the documents, at times we forget the provisions of law. Now suppose you are sitting in Surat and you received a summon from Delhi investigation wing, and you read in the summon that summon to a witness, and it's mentioned that your presence is required in Delhi at so and so date in the case of Mr. So and so. And you are requested to file the following detailed written submissions. You can very well draft a letter mentioning that, sir, my presence cannot be expected in this case because the summon is not accompanied by the returned air ticket and the distance between Surat and Delhi is more than 500 kilometers. Friends, while drafting, you need to know your rights and department's obligations, and department's rights and your obligations. Okay, so your right becomes his obligation, his right becomes your obligations. That has to be taken due care of. So whenever you find that the assessing officer is calling for something which is not empowered to do it, something is not empowered to do it. Suppose in a presumptive taxation scheme, you furnished a return of income. Your turnover is say 1 crore of rupees and you have shown profit of 8 lakhs of rupees. 8 lakhs of profit is disclosed. And the assessing officer calls for the details as to the expenditure or the deductions vis-a-vis 92 lakhs of rupees claimed by you. In that case, you can say, sir, I am engaged in this business. I am covered by 44AD. I have gone by presumptive taxation scheme. You cannot call me for this. So we need to know that whenever the assessing officer or the CIT appeal or the tribunal or any other authority for that matter is crossing his limits, we need to politely say that, sir, this is not within your powers and you cannot call me for these details. Similar is the case while dealing with the show cause notice. Whenever they issue show cause notice, you need to go by the content of the show cause notice. One thing is for certain that whenever there is a show cause notice issued by the assessing officer or a summon issued by the assessing officer or by the investigation wing, we must know that there is some information available with him which is going against you. But while dealing with that, you need to understand as to what are the rights and obligations on either side while dealing with that same. And one more thing to be cautious about thing is that you must know that every time you cannot have win-win situation in this situation, because especially in the context of 115 BBE and 271 AAD, you need to be very careful, because now BBE has already come into play from assessment year, I think 16-17. So now if any deemed income is subjected to addition, it will be taxed at 78% tax now. So in order to see, while dealing with some proposals of the assessing officer as to certain things being treated as unexplained cash credit, say, in that case, you try to link that with business income so that at least you can reduce the incidence of taxation from 78% to 30%. Suppose in a situation like this, suppose in your books of account, there is some unexplained cash credit. You have taken deposits of 5 lakhs, 5 lakhs, 5 lakhs from 4-5 people. Okay. And those 5 lakhs of deposits are from persons not assessed to tax. They do not have PAN number, or even if they have PAN number, they have not filed the returns of income. You also know that they have deposited cash into their banking account before issuing a check in your favor. You also know that those depositors are men of no means. You will not be in a position to prove genuineness of the transaction or creditworthiness of the transactions. You also know that if those cash creditors are summoned, they are going to say, sir, we do not know anything about this. મને તો cash આપ્યા હતા મેં સામે check આપી દીધેલો. You know about all these things, and you know that this addition is going to trigger the invocation of 115 BBE. How to escape out of the mischief of 115 BBE? You look into the rest of the documents without prejudice, assuming though not admitting. You look into your credential, your other book results. Suppose in your profit and loss account, you find that your shortage in connection with the manufacturing you may have done, or in connection with the trading activity you may have carried out, has gone up from say 5% in the last year to 20% this year. Shortage having gone up from 5% to 15%. So in that case, is it possible for you? This may be a case specific thing. I'm not hinting you at anything, but if you can think that if your turnover is say 1 crore of rupees and shortage is increased by 10% over last year's shortage, so that means 1 crore 10% is 10 lakhs of rupees. So suppose the shortage is increased by you in the books of account by suppressing your sale or by effecting your sale out of books, and that out of book sale consideration you received, you routed it in the name of unsecured loans. In that case, you are trying to link the application of 10 lakhs in the form of unsecured loan with the source being unaccounted sale, which has been shown as shortage. If you can do something like this, you can definitely have a stand that even if 68 addition is required to be made, the original source thereof is in the form of unaccounted sale effected by you. In that case, the tax can be levied at 30%. Friends, assessing officer is not going to believe this. Assessing officer is not going to accept this for sure. This may be useful at the level of higher appellate hierarchy, in which you can say that, sir, I understand that my unsecured loan, my cash credit remained unexplained. But it was unexplained as to the confirmation of the party. But when I say it is not the amount I received from Mr. So-and-so, it is my own income received from my unaccounted business. In that case, it could have been taxed at only 30%. This may be a line of argument you can think of. Then implication of 271 AAD has also to be taken care of while making effective drafting because whenever there is a false entry or escaping entry, there is a penalty of 100% now from last year. So we have to be extremely careful while making proper drafting in the written submissions we file. Assuming though orbiting we have already covered, so I'm not going into greater detail with this again. So this is basically about having alternative arguments to be canvassed in one go. Alternative arguments being canvassed in one go. Suppose, let us take a simple illustration. You are claiming deduction under section 80 IAB or IBA. You are into a housing project, affordable housing. So your 100% tax is exempt from taxation. Okay. And the assessing officer issues a show cause notice that these expenses are bogus and I want to disallow that. Your primary thrust, primary argument will be that, sir, my expenses are not bogus, not genuine, or he says that you have incurred the expenses in cash. So I want to invoke 40A3. Okay, he says that expenditure in excess of 10,000 paid in cash are required to be disallowed under section 40A3. Okay, your arguments have to be twofold. First line of argument would be that 40A3 notwithstanding, you would say 40A3 also considers exceptional circumstances as specified in the Act itself and also in Rule 6DD. That if in a given situation, if there is a bank holiday, if there is a genuine difficulty, if there is a reasonable cause, so many long list of things are there. In that situation, the person, despite his having made cash payment in excess of 10,000, the expenditure cannot be disallowed. There are so many judgments of tribunals and even of the high courts taking a view that if the expenditure is proved to be genuine, merely because it is paid in cash, cannot be disallowed. This would be my one line of argument in the drafting while dealing with that issue. But my alternative line of argument, which I say assuming though not admitting, my alternative argument would be that, sir, if you disallow this under 40A3, my corresponding business income will stand increased. But since my entire business income is liable for deduction under section 80 IBA, ultimately my total income will continue to remain at what has been shown in the return of income. You cannot make any addition to my total income. You can always make my addition in my initial income. So you disallow my GTI. So you make addition to my gross total income and correspondingly increase my entitlement of deduction. So ultimately total income remains at the same level. So this will be an alternative argument that has to be canvassed while properly drafting. So whenever you draft a document, a written submission, take care of this. Then what can be an alternative argument to this? And if you can canvass that, even after assuming without admitting about something wrongdoing having been committed by you, make it a point of doing it. So that will go a long way. Then to consider the consequences while drafting and uploading any text or document before any authority. This also I have covered already. Minimizing the loss at the time may be more beneficial. That also I have covered, because whenever you are encountering a situation like this, now in second bullet, read point 1. This is very important. Those who are junior and having started practice recently may not be aware of this. That is why. See, I think up till assessment year 16-17, there used to be a section called 271(1)(c) for levy of penalty. But from assessment year 17-18, 271(1)(c) is no longer in application. Now the new section is 270(A). 270(A). And 270(A) says that there can be two types of penalties that can be levied. It says that the addition generally will trigger underreporting of income. So my returned income is say 5 lakhs of rupees and assessed income is 10 lakhs of rupees. My returned income is 5 lakhs of rupees, which was also accepted in 143(1)(a), but my assessed income is 10 lakhs of rupees. What is the amount of addition? 5 lakhs. So that 5 lakhs per se would be my underreporting of income. Now, underreporting of income can be subdivided in two parts. You try to understand. If the underreporting of income is just underreporting of income, nothing beyond that. So I say underreporting income per se. Underreporting of income per se. In that case, the penalty is only 50%, 50%. But if the underreporting of income is as a consequence of misreporting of income, underreporting as a consequence of misreporting, the penalty is 200%. Now, friends, if you read the assessment orders of assessment year 17-18 or 18-19, you will find that the assessing officer would only mention one sentence: penalty is being initiated for underreporting of income. He would not mention as to whether underreporting of income is per se or underreporting of income is as a consequence of misreporting. In this type of situation, it is better that if the assessing officer makes an addition only for underreporting of income per se, and if you fill up form number 68 immediately after the assessment is completed and after making payment of the demand within a period of 30 days, then section 270(a) says that penalty even at 50% will be waived in full. There won't be any penalty, friends. You just read section 270 capital A, 270 capital AA, and form 68 under the rules side, and you will find that in the assessment proceedings, whenever you find that some additions are inevitable, whenever you find some additions to be inevitable, you try to file your return submission in such a way that those additions are not resulting into additions of misreporting, of the nature of misreporting. So if you can ensure that your addition being made by the assessing officer, even in the faceless assessment, is just underreporting of income per se and not underreporting of income as a consequence of misreporting. And if you ask your client, if you convince your client to pay up the tax and file form number 68, the entire penalty will be, it's a permanent amnesty scheme. Permanent amnesty scheme imbibed in the Income Tax Act. So this can be taken due advantage of. And say, second thing, you need to ensure that you are not hit by section 115BBE, because as we already discussed, that will trigger the tax liability to go up from 30% to 78%. So that has to be taken care of. About the contractual drafting, just a couple of things, because I don't have to go into greater details, but memorandum of agreement, partnership deed, LLP deed, technical collaboration, whenever you draft these type of documents, you always consider the probable litigation into consideration. That is number one. When you consider the litigation in mind, you need to think of several issues arising or attached to that. One is force majeure clause. This force majeure clause, friends, now force majeure is not an English word. I think it's a Latin word or something, and it has got different definitions under different contracts. So whenever you are drafting a contract, you can have your own definition of force majeure, because this actually cropped up especially during the course of this pandemic. Whether the pandemic amounts to force majeure or not, I had received a case where one Reliance group of companies, which had taken huge office premises across India on rent, on lease. Try to understand. Reliance took Reliance Communications and Reliance Digital and so many things. So they are paying, say, lakhs and lakhs of rupees per office premises, per one particular building. And there may in Ahmedabad, there may be, they have 30 such shops or offices. And they would have hundreds, thousands of shops all over India. And there was no specific clause for force majeure. The contract only provided that in case of force majeure, the violation of the law will not take place. The contract will not be treated as having been violated if the violation arises out of force majeure. And the issue was whether the shops remaining closed during lockdown, is covered by this particular term or not. The tenant took a plea that is covered by force majeure. If it is covered by force majeure, the contract does not apply. If the contract does not apply, the rent does not become payable. So they said that we are not required to make payment of rent because the contract becomes inoperational during this period. So in a situation like this, it is very important for us to understand that whenever we put a clause for force majeure in the contract, we need to define that in a proper way. What will constitute this? What will not constitute this? Earthquake, normal things we all know. Tsunami, we know tsunami force majeure will take place. Earthquake will be covered by that. But whether a pandemic will be covered by force majeure or not, nobody knows about that. It's a litigative thing. That has to be clarified. Same thing about the jurisdiction of the court and the arbitration clause. One good thing is to put arbitration clause that the people cannot just knock the doors of the court without going through the arbitration route. In the court also, suppose there is a contract between two persons, one sitting in Ahmedabad, the other sitting in Chennai. Then it needs to clarify whether the litigation will fall under Chennai court or Ahmedabad court. So that has to be provided for in the contract itself. So all these things, and the contract should also provide for remedies in case of failure of certain terms. Whenever there is a failure of certain terms, what will be the remedy? You can always say you cannot do this, but what you have done that, the contract should provide the penalty. And to put it beyond that, the contract should also provide for certain terms to be the essence of contract. What is essence of contract? Essence of contract is that but for fulfillment of that, the contract is to be treated as never having been fulfilled. That is the essence of contract. So I would put it this way, that if I say that in a particular contract, this particular thing is essence of contract, that if that essence of contract does not remain there, the contract is void ab initio. But if there is a violation in connection with any other terms and condition other than essence of contract, then the contract becomes liable for some penalty or charge or interest or something like that. So that has to be differentiated, that which terms constitute essence of contract and which terms constitute any other violations. And out of those violations, which violations constitute force majeure and which violations constitute other than force majeure. All these things have to be clarified in the properly drafted document that has to be taken care of. Next. To incorporate all the terms and conditions that may be agreed upon or required to be agreed upon, the contracts bind only the parties signing the same. This is very important, especially in connection with I came across a particular case. There was a partnership firm. Let me give you a practical illustration to this. There was a partnership firm between two brothers two real brothers. They were sharing 50% profit each. And one particular clause of that partnership did provided that in case of death of any of the partners, the remaining partner, the firm will not stand dissolved, and the legal heir of the deceased will be compulsorily taken as the partner by the surviving partner. You understand? Okay, only two partners, two brothers or two friends or whosoever. I mean, there were two partners, A and B. The deed clearly providing that in case of death of A or B, as the case may be, the partnership will not stand dissolved, and the legal heir of the deceased will have to be taken as partner with the same share, with the same terms and conditions. One partner died, and the other partner said that I don't want to take the legal heir of the deceased as my partner. Either I don't trust him, or he's too junior, or I will not give him 50% share. We were equals in terms of experience. I was giving my partner 50% share, but that his son is just 20 years old. How can I take him as my partner and pay him 50%? What is the legal remedy available to the partner, the legal heir of the partner? Can he enforce this clause by filing a civil suit? The answer is no, he cannot. Because partnership is a contract between A and B. A's son or B's son is not a party to that contract. So whether to take A's son as partner on the death of A is the discretion of B, or whether to join B as partner to replace his late father's position is the discretion of A's son. B cannot force A's son to be a partner, and A's son cannot force B to take him as a partner, despite there being a specific clause in the deed of partnership. We need to take care of this legal position. So while drafting a partnership deed, it is better, we always advise that you just put an enabling provision. I would put it this way, a goodwill clause. I would say that whenever there is a death of any of the partners, an attempt will be made to take his legal heir, or if there are more than one legal heirs, then more than one legal heirs as the partners into that firm. But if that is not possible for whatever reason, in that case, the legal heir of the deceased will be entitled not just to the amount that may be standing to the credit of the deceased person in the books of the partnership firm, but also to a share in the goodwill. If we can put it like this, then we are playing safe on both the counts. Either the partner has got a call to take the legal heir as partner without payment of goodwill, because in that case he's replacing his father who is dead. And if he doesn't want to take him as a partner, then the legal heir of the deceased can say that, okay, good enough, don't make me a partner, but then my father had a stake in the goodwill, so pay me 50% of the goodwill of the firm and continue our business as a going concern. So this may be a good way of drafting a commercial deed, partnership deed to be precise. Drafting of will. Any ambiguity in the will is likely to result in a lot of difficulties with there being no remedy. A case had actually come to me. There used to be a partnership firm engaged in the business of jewelry, gold and diamond jewelries. Okay. And it was not a partnership firm, sorry, it was a proprietorship. The father was running a business of jewelry. He had made a will. He had two sons. And the will was drafted by him in a very poorly way. So will mentioned કે મારા ગુજરી ગયા પછી મારી જ્યાં CG રોડ પરની દુકાન છે એ હું મારા દીકરા A ને આપું છું. ગુજરાતીમાં લખેલું એ હતું, મારા CG રોડની દુકાન મારા દીકરા A ને આપું છું અને મારી બધી જ મિલકતો હું દીકરા B ને આપું છું. મારી બીજી બધી જ મિલકતો હું દીકરા બી ને આપું છું. Father died. There was no executor, nothing. This was the will. એટલે દીકરા બી એ કહ્યું પેલા મોટા ભાઈને કે આ દુકાન તારી, બધો માલ મારો. કારણ કે દુકાન હું દીકરા એ ને આપું છું, બાકીની બધી જ મિલકતો દીકરા બી ને આપું છું. એટલે ઘર પણ મારું, અંદરનો સ્ટોક, દુકાનની અંદરનો સ્ટોક પણ મારો. એટલે કહ્યું 4 દિવાલો તારી, બાકીનું બધું ઉપાડી લઈ જાઓ. And the matter had come to me for discussion purposes. I said, I don't know what father actually meant, because the person has died. There is no clarification in the will. Friends, દુકાન આપું છું એટલે શું આપું છું? Whether દુકાન as ચોકઠું or દુકાન with stock, with debtors, with all assets, that was not clarified anywhere. So whenever you draft a document like will, some tips. First is, make it a point of clarifying everything in greatest possible detail. This is number one. You just sit down as if that person has already expired and try to distribute what goes to whom. Okay, try to do that. And then you just try to read the will, whether what you are physically doing is forthcoming from the drafting of the will, yes or no. If no, you need to improvise your will, the drafting. That is number one. Number two, always have executors in the will. Always have executor in the will. And we mention in the wills we draft that I have discussed the minutest detail of this will with the executor, who has been my well-wisher, who has been well-wisher of all the legatees of my will. So whenever there is a doubt, whenever there is some confusion as to interpretation of the will, my executor can be consulted as to what I really meant by something. So some clarifications in this regard can also be made while drafting the will. Third is, friends, the stamp paper, notarization, registration, written versus oral. See, oral will is not valid now. Oral will, there used to be a point of time where courts had taken a stand that oral wills are also valid, but now there are no oral wills permissible under the Succession Act. So there has to be a written will, but there is no requirement of that will to be notarized or stamped or registered. But it's always better to get the will registered, or at least to get the same notarized. And when you get the same registered or notarized, make it a point that it is having a proper witnesses. If the person having drafted the will is aged, try to have a doctor as at least one of the witnesses. So that is also to be taken care of. And the second thing, just a tip for tax planning. I'm just giving you some tips. You can just note down the section 168 of the Income Tax Act. 168 of the Income Tax Act. And you read that section with section 159 of the Income Tax Act. 159 and 168. What are these two sections say about? Suppose a person dies in the middle of the financial year. Say a person dies on 28th of February. 28th of February 2021 is the date a person dies. Then what will be the tax liability of that person for this 11 months period? 1st April till 28th of February. The income earned by that person on the cutoff date, on the date of his death, cutoff date on which he expired, will be subject matter of filing of return of income under section 159, which will be furnished by the legal heir of the deceased. Okay, so if I die today, my income of 11 months of the current financial year will be subjected to filing of return of income by own name, but it will be filed by my wife or my son, as the case may be. Okay, this is 159. But suppose I die, but I have bank fixed deposits. I'm earning interest income on that. I have properties let out to various parties and I'm receiving rental income from that. Okay, so rental income from properties and interest income on fixed deposits. I've given advance to various parties and I'm receiving interest from that. And suppose the actual devolvement means my assets getting transferred to my legal heir. If that takes, say, 2 years' time, because of some dispute or because of whatever reason, then what will be the fate of that rental income and interest income received between the period from my death till devolvement of the underlying assets? Am I clear? The income received between the period of the death of the person till the assets get devolved upon the legatees or the legal heir of the deceased. Section 168 says that this will be the income which is separately assessable to tax and which will be, the return will be furnished by the executor under section 168 of the Act. The section provides, the law provides that if there is just one executor, he will get individual taxation. If there are more than one executors, that will be liable for AOP taxation. So friends, this may be a good tax planning device to draft a will in such a way that though 3 or 4 or 5 members' names are mentioned as executors, I would say that Mr. A, B, C, and D are my well-wishers. I discussed the terms of the will with A, B, C, and D, each 4 of them, but I wish that one of the 4 should be made by executor, not all 4. Not all 4. One of the 4. So if person named first is alive and willing, he would be my executor. If the person named first is not alive or not willing, then number 2 will be my executor, and so on and so forth. So only one executor, and then we can take a tax planning device. Suppose there is a rental income. In that case, till the property gets devolved upon the legal heir, individual taxation will apply in relation to the return being furnished under 168 by the executor. So he will get exemption of the initial 2,50,000, then 5% taxation, and so on and so forth. So all benefits will continue, because if that devolves, it will devolve upon the son or the wife or whatever, and they may be taxable at the highest maximum marginal rate. So there won't be any additional benefit of slab available after devolvement. So drafting of the will can also be a measure of good tax planning, and that we can take care of. Drafting is a peculiar thing. It may not affect many of us, but this is a very peculiar thing. I'm just reading this. It's for a very interesting thing. And most of the, we have got so many Muslim clients, and most of my Muslim clients were not knowing about this, even Muslim clients. With respect to Shia, a Muslim may, I'm reading this, a Muslim may, by his will, dispose of only 1/3 of his property which is left after payment of funeral expenses and debts. So Muslim is prevented from making a will bequeathing more than 1/3 of his property. 1/3 of his property after meeting with all liabilities. Okay, net assets. He can bequeath only 1/3. If he does for more, it's not permissible. Beyond this, if he's a Sunni Muslim, even this 1/3, he can bequeath a will kari shake only in the name of third parties, not in the name of his legal heirs. See, if I'm a Muslim, worth say 9 crore of rupees, after meeting with all my liabilities, how much will I can make? 3 crores of rupees. Okay, 1/3, so 3 crore. Okay, so 1/3, 3 crore of will I can make. But if I make a will and say that 3 crore of rupees, I got 1 son and 2 daughters, and I say that my 3 crore of asset will go to my son. That 3 crore will go to my son. That will is of no value. Will has got no value because as per the Sunni law, even the 1/3 will can be made only in benefit of a third party who is not a beneficiary under the Muslim law, who is not a heir entitled to a share. So if I make a will of 1/3 in favor of my legal heir, that will be accepted as correct and binding if and only if after my death, all my other legal heirs, after my death, all my legal heirs give in writing as to their having accepted the terms of the will. If they do not give in writing after my death, even the will of 1/3 of the asset is completely null and void. So while dealing with the Muslim clients, you need to take care of this also, that you make it a point that the will is a legal will, a binding will, so that after the death of the person concerned, it remains in force. Friends, with I think it's just while giving thank, I just given just a reference of 2 books which I have liked very much. A Sapiens, you must have heard that. If you are fond of reading, if reading is your hobby, read these 2 books. One is Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. The other is The Professional by Subrata Bagchi. He is also a wonderful author and promoter of a company called Mindtree. It's just like Infosys, it's an IT tech company. It's a beautiful, wonderful read. You must have that in your library and you must read it. And if you want to have a different perspective of life, watch this movie, Ship of Theseus. It's an English movie. It's partly in Hindi and partly in English, made by an Indian, Anand Gandhi. You may not get this movie screened on screens. It's an old movie, some 10, 15 years back, but you can definitely get a CD. So friends, with this, I close my presentation. If there is any question, I'm ready to respond. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. It was a very interactive and good session, sir. We are thankful to you. Any members who have a question regarding to this topic, you can directly ask by unmuting yourself for.
Ketan bhai,
Yes, sir.
your voice is not audible.
Now audible?
Yes, yes.
It was very interactive and wonderful session, sir. We are thankful to you. Members who have questions regarding today's sessions, you can directly ask by unmuting yourself, or alternatively, you can also write in chat box also. Otherwise, we are move towards vote of thanks.
Chat, I see so many chats. Okay, chat doesn't contain any questions. No.
Okay. So now I request our Deputy Convener CA Sanjay Saladia to give the formal vote of thanks. Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Ketan bhai. I'm audible, sir.
Yes, yes, sir.
Thank you all. With my great pleasure, on behalf of VKCPE Study Circle, I would like to give a bunch of thanks to an eminent speaker, CA Bharatji R. Popat. Sir, as you sharing your valuable knowledge regarding drafting of deeds and document, includes what is the rule of additional evidence, how draft a deed, how to work on document and present it to authority, what is dynamic jurisdiction, and also briefly describe various case laws, which is most important for present faceless scenario. Sir, for your valuable knowledge acquired, our study circle always glad with, and we all strongly wish as a speaker you came further and for another session. At lastly, I thankful our office bearer and our convener CA Ketan Bhai Gadia and all committee member of VKCPE Study Circle for arrange such a knowledgeable session for us, and also thankful to all members present during the session and make a bright and shiny this whole session. Once again, thank you, sir. Over to Ketan bhai. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Now, so those members who have still pending to write their membership number for attendance purpose, please write down so that we can enable to give the attendance sheet to you.
કેતનભાઈ મને પણ ક્રેડિટ આપી દેજો.
Yes, yes, sir. તમારો membership number note કરી લીધો.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now we conclude our session.
Sir, we
here.
are concluding this meeting. Sir, તમારું એડ્રેસ જે વેબસાઇટ પર છે એ જ છે ને?
હા એ જ છે.
અમદાવાદ વાળું.
હા એ જ છે, સેમ જ છે.
ઓકે સર.